Uh-huh. Well, it's late, you know, to start Maariv at 9 and have
At 9:25 or 9:15.
whatever it is.
You're right. No, they did the right thing.
Oh, to have it a Zoom?
Huh?
I said they announced
Yes. True.
that it'll be that as well.
Joseph is here. No?
Yeah, well, his stuff is here. I assume he's in the men's room. Okay, I'm going to start the learning sponsors as everybody comes in, and then we'll go ahead. Learning sponsors: a year of learning, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren of Toby Paris, Saratova, Bad Yisrael Dov in her memory. Friends of Nina Monester, Nechama Asna, Bad Yitzchak Aharon. Many friends of Stephen Vigdil, Ezech Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz, in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka. Isaac and Evelyn Blacher, in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser. Month of Learning by Melon Haran Haller, in memory of his brother, Yaakov Ben Abraham. By Jill and Perry Meltzer, in memory of Jill's mother, Bela Bat Abraham, and Perry's father. Oh, wait a second, that's the wrong one. Okay. Perry's father, David Ben Fishel Halevi. Mark Linder, in memory of his mother, Yona Bat Zalman Leib. Rabbi Isaac Schmerler, in memory of his wife, Menyasima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. And friends of Marilyn Schmerler, in her memory, Menyasima Bat Yitzchak Isaac. A week of learning by Judy Iger, in memory of her father-in-law, Shlomo Michal Ben Aharon. By Sid Paris, in memory of his wife, Saratova Bat Yisrael Dov. By Jack Gilman, in memory of his mother, Elka Bat Yeshayahu. By Alan Blumenfeld, in memory of his father, Gershon Ben Achaver Pinchas Kohen. By David Mindel Cheslow, in memory of his mother, Bela Bas Meir. By Sam and Shifra Coleman, in memory of his father, Yaakov Ben Shmuel. And that is it. May Hashemas have an aliyah, crank Rafael, Velti Shir Shematliya, and L'chol B'nai Israel, a good Gaben Shtir.
Amen.
Okay. Okay. Today's daf, we're going to be dealing with Lamed, right? Okay, but I just want to quickly make the transition. Okay, we had Rabbi Yeshavev says on the bottom of the previous Amud, Boven et Sevech El Akiva ben Yosef. Come and let us scream at Akiva ben Yosef. Shaya Omer Kol She'en Lo Biat Yisrael. Whoever doesn't marry, and here we can use the word fitting or appropriate. Again, Jewish girl, Havlad Mamzer. In other words, if it isn't a valid marriage, that's Tofsin, then the implication is clearly he would consider it, or even over on simply the love, is what the point that Gemara was bringing to us. He would consider that progeny a mamzer. My Beinaihu, what's the difference between them? And that's the bottom of the previous Amud. That was Kaf, right? Tet Amud Beis at the very bottom. Okay. And then the Gemara is going to go over Ika Beinaihu. What's the difference between them? Okay. Right. So there we're going to get to the Lamed. We're going to try to do Lamed and Lamed Aleph today. What?
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to try. Okay.
Lamed Aleph says low.
Okay. Chayve. Okay. Asay mitzare va'adume. Okay. Talking about the prohibition. Okay. Regarding the marriage to a Mitzri and an Edomi. What's the prohibition? The marriage, if it's in the first generation, okay, it's one thing, okay? And even though there could be Tofsin, okay, the implication is he cannot maintain her and continue with her as a wife. Rabbi Yoshevav Okay, that's acceptable to the view of Rabbi Yoshua. Why? Ila afuke mitama de Rabbi Simai kaate. If it comes to exclude the view, the reasoning of Rabbi Simai, that's when it comes. Shapir, then it's fine. Okay, then it's an agreement with the view of Rabbi Akiva in that situation. Okay, right? Because again, if it's a lav, if there's a lav there, okay, that's the issue. Okay, but what happens if Ella, says the Gemara, each ha'ama denafshe kama, if he's giving his own view, kol she'ein lo bia b'Yisrael havlad mamzer, that where there is no physical relationship, let's put it that way, with an appropriate Jewish woman, then the Vlad is a mamzer, which more or less was the view of Rabbi Akiva. Remember, Rabbi Akiva didn't exactly phrase it that way, okay? But nevertheless, va'afilu chai ve'aseh, okay? All right, so even in that case, when you have a transgression of a positive command, all right, that's what he's saying. My benaihu. What's then the difference between them? Okay, ika benaihu bu'ula lekohen. I'm sorry, ika benaihu bu'ula lekohen gadol. That's the difference between them. In other words, with the example of for Kohen Gadol, you really have two leniencies. One is you have it's an assay where the Kohen Gadol is commanded to marry a virgin. That's an assay. Okay, so therefore it's not really a lav. And number two, the other kula is that only applies to the Kohen Gadol. It doesn't apply to the average Israelite. Okay, so you have two leniencies there, so that would make a difference, right? Umayishna. Okay, so what's the difference here? Dahavale asay she'eno shaveh b'kol. That number one, notice the Gemara gives us both of them in a single sentence. Number one, it's an asay. It's a positive commandment, okay? And number two, it only really doesn't apply to everyone. It only applies to the Kohen Gadol. Okay? Now, going on. Amar Rav Chisda. Says Rav Chisda as follows. Hakol modim v'ba'el hanida shemishalem knas. Everyone agrees that if one has relations with a woman that was nida, they have to pay this fine. Okay? Laman da amar yesh ba havaya. According to the one who says that as in her existing state. In other words, that it's a valid marriage. Right? It's a be able to, right? That it's a valid kedushin, right? Ha nami yesh ba havaya. Here too, she's in her existing condition. Namely, either she's the nida.
And a woman who's a nida could be the kedushin is how.
Right. So therefore, the point is that is a kedushin that tafsin. Okay, and she's only, so to speak, unavailable at that moment. Okay, but there's also no reason not to say that you cannot be mekayim. Okay, that you cannot continue with her. Laman da amar ru'uya lekaima, and therefore the one who says she is suitable to continue as a wife. Ha nami ru'uya lekaima. Here too, she is suitable to be maintained, to keep as a wife. So you can't use that as an argument to say that it's not a valid marriage, or that better still, that the progeny would be mamzerim. Okay. V'la'afuke mid'Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakaneh. This comes to exclude the view of Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakaneh. Why? Tanya Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakaneh, what does he teach as follows? Haya oseh et Yom HaKippurim kishabat l'tashlumin. That he would make, okay, Yom Kippur a parallel to Shabbos in regards to any payment for damages. Okay, what does he mean there, payment for damages? basically he's saying if for some reason you did an act, okay, that was over on that day, okay, and you would have to make amends for it. I'll use that phrase. Okay, that is clearly true for Shabbat. He's applying that same principle to Yom Kippur as well. Okay, namely, Ma Shabbat mitchayev benafsho upatur min hatashlumin. And in this case, if you're over on Shabbat, okay, instead of having to, you have the situation of maybe you'd have to bring a korban, or maybe you'd be chayev karet, okay, and karet is the right situation. Af yom hakippurim mitchayev benafsho upatur min hatashlumin. So he said that applies to Yom Kippur as well.
Shabbos, which is your Chayav Mises Best and Skila,
right?
If you were Chayav money in the action,
you would only
you're
pater from the money, and you're you chayav and the misa. So he made the Yom Kippur the same kind of situation, right? Okay. So Gemara then asks, so that we go now a little bit on a tangent. Okay. My Tama, the Rabbi Nechunya ben Akaneh, what was his reasoning that he made in that situation? Amar Abai says Abai ne'amar ason b'idei adam, that was said harm, ason, by a person, but ne'amar ason b'idei shamayim. And in the other case, right, it says a harm in heaven, all right? Namely, ma ason ha'amur b'idei adam patur min hatashlumin, whereas ason there, okay, right, is yeah, all right, everything all right?
pretty good.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Whereas a harm in regards, right, ma'ason ha'amur b'idei adam patur min hatashlumin, okay, in that issue, he would be exempt from the payment. Af ason ha'amur b'idei shamayim patur min hatashlumin. So therefore, there too, his argument is, since ason regards Yom Kippur is one regarding b'idei shamayim, he should likewise be exempt from any payment. This is challenged. Matkifla Rav Ada bar Ahava. So he challenges it. Mimai dechika mazaher laho Yaakov levanei al tzinin upachin b'yedei shamayim ninhu. At what point, he says, do we see that when Yaakov warns his sons about cold and heat, that this is something that is caused by heaven, that this is the result? Dilma al arya v'gabai, the baidei adam ninu. Perhaps what he was warning of them about was a lot of other things, namely, be careful of wild animals or thieves, all right? That is not an issue of shamayim, that's an issue of human concern.
Is the issue of human?
That's what you, if you can avoid it, right? Right? So what happens? Atu Yaakov, aha azhir. Comes Yaakov, and this is what he's warning about. Aha lo azhir. And then the other, you're saying he wouldn't warn him about it? Yaakov al kol mile azhir. Okay? No, Jacob was warning them about all sorts of potential dangers in their travel. Remember, they were going down to Egypt, right? Vitzinin pachin b'dei shamayim ninhu. Are we saying then that the cold and heat are something that is controlled by heaven? V'hatanya, isn't it taught elsewhere in a Braita? Hakol b'dei shamayim chutz mitzinin upachin, that everything is within the hands of heaven, with the exception of cold and heat. Shne'amar as cited by this pasuk, Tzinim pachim b'derech ikesh, shomer nafsho yirchak mehem. Okay? In other words, that a person has some control on whether they're suffering from heat or suffering from cold. That's the implication, right? The two, and furthermore, says the Gemara, Aryeh v'ganavai b'dei adam ninhu. Okay, here's your question, Bob, right? Okay, are we saying that lions, okay, and thieves are in the hands of men? There's some control, that people have control over whether that's the case? Va'amar Rav Yosef, and didn't Rav Yosef say, V'chein tani Rabbi Chia, and likewise it was taught by Rabbi Chia, Miyom shecharav Beit HaMikdash, okay, from the time that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Afal pi shebitlu Sanhedrin, even though the Sanhedrin was, I don't want to say nullified, but I really want to say their meeting there in the Beis Mikdash was nullified, okay? But they met elsewhere, okay? Arba mitot lo bitlu. Are we saying then that 4 possible means of death, 4 punishments really, okay, were nullified? Lo bitlu? No, they weren't nullified. Ha bitlu laho, but they nullified them. Ella, rather, says the Gemara as we go on, okay, to Amud Beis, Din arba'a mitot lo bitlu, that the judgment of the 4 different kinds of capital punishment were not nullified. For example, so continues the Gemara, Mishinit chayev skila, one who would have been found guilty and punishable by stoning, right? O nafal min hagag, o chaya harsato. Either he fell from a roof, okay? So part of skila, remember, was the person was pushed off a cliff, okay? So that fall aspect. Oh, chaya darsato. And then they dropped a boulder on him, okay? Or they was trampled by a wild animal, okay? Second example, umishinit chayev sreifa, or if somebody was found guilty of an act and they would be punished by sreifa, by burning, o nafal b'deleka, either they fell into a fire, okay, o nachash machisho, or some sort of serpent or snake bit them, and the bite, okay, the poison, whatever it was burned them right inside. Umishinit chayev harega, or somebody that committed an act and therefore transgression would result in punishment of harega, okay, right? What happens? That was basically the use of a sword, right? Oh, nimsar lemalchut, either they were given over to the authority, the government, who used the sword in many cases, cut off their head. O listim ba'im alav, or there were thieves, robbers that attacked him, and they also could have killed him with a sword. Okay? Umi shenit chayev chenek, or somebody who may have transgressed and would be punishable by strangulation. O tovea binahar, either he would drown in a river. O mate besarunuki, or he would die by diphtheria. And if we were using Koren, they have a whole note there that I don't know if Art Scroll does, about what diphtheria was and how it basically is an illness that closes off the airwaves, okay, and the pharynx and things like that, okay? Ela ipuch, but rather I would say the opposite. Aryeh v'ganavai b'dei shemayim. Okay, here again, Bob, coming back to your question, right? The attack by a lion or by thieves, that could be based on an act of heaven. Sinin upachim b'yedei adam. But the suffering from cold or heat, that could be an act that's within the control of human beings. Okay. So what happens? Rabba Amar says Rabba. Tama de Rabbi Nechunya ben Akaneh mehacha. He gives a different basis, based on a pasuk. He says, "Ve'im ha'alem alem ya'alemo am haaretz et einehem min ha'ish hahu betito mizaro lemolech v'samti ani et panai be'ish hahu u'b'mishpachto v'chrati oto." And if the people of the land do not all hide their eyes from that man when he gives his seed to Molech and not put him to death, that's the implication, then I will set my face against that man, against his family, and will cut him off. Okay? What happened?
Chorus is worse than Mises Best.
Right. Okay? Amra Torah, and that's what the Torah says, Karet Shali Kmita Shalachem. That my act of kares, which we normally defined as somebody either dying at a young age or that his progeny died, okay? One of those two explanations are often given for kares, is like mita shalachem, like the death by the beis din. That's the point. Ma mita shalachem patur min ha-tashlumin. The same way, if somebody is condemned to death by the beis din, okay, they are exempt if they were also required from payments from the payments. All right, kum rabba minei, right? What happens? Afkaret shali patur min tashlumin. So likewise, somebody that is condemned to kares would be also exempt from payments. Okay. Good, exactly. My ika bein Rava le'Abaye. So Gemara. So what then is the difference between the explanation of Rava and that of Abaye? Ika beinaihu. Excuse me. The difference is zar she'achal truma, a non-kohen that partakes in eating truma. Le'Abaye, for Abaye patur, that person would be exempt. L'Rava chayav, and that for Rava, that person would be obligated, would be transgressing. So Gemara asks, Abaye patur, are we really saying that Abaye would exempt the person? Okay, V'ha'amar Rav Chisda, and didn't Rav Chisda say, Modeh Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakanah, that he acknowledged, Begonev chalevo shel chavero, in a situation where somebody steals the fat of his neighbor, ve'achlo, and he eats it. Okay, so now you have two different transgressions, right? Shehu chayav, that he is obligated, he's transgressed. Shekvar nitchayev b'gneva kodem shaba liyidei isur chelev, that he's already transgressed the prohibition of stealing before he even comes to any prohibition regarding eating the chelev. Okay? Alma, therefore, the me'idana, the agve kaniya. Why? Because from the moment of the time that he's lifted up by stealing that chelev, he's acquired it, right? Mitchayev b'nafsho. He's therefore done this act and he's transgressed, right? Lo hava ad achile. Okay, so it does.
He's not chayav chorus until he
right.
eats it.
He does it right. No, he does not be right. He's chayav on the geneva, but he's not chayav lo hava ad. He's not chayav on the other act, namely eating, other punishment.
On the eating of
right
the,
of the other punishment, right, which is kares. If were he to eat that until he actually eats it,
right?
That's the point. Okay, hachanami. Here too, we're saying ba'idna the agve kaniya, at the time that he, excuse me, lifts it up, he's acquired it. Mitchayev b'nafsho. He therefore has committed a transgression. Okay, and is to
chayav
be
pay-
punished.
He's chayav to pay for it.
In that case of where it's stealing,
Right.
right? Lo have ad achile, okay, but he doesn't get the punishment of the beis din, if that were the case, until he actually consumed it. Hacha b'mayaskinen. What are we then talking about? Kegon shetachav lo chavero letoch piv. Maybe we're talking about a situation that somebody else forced it into his mouth. Mara says, so sof kevan de la'aseh kaniya. Ultimately, once he chewed it, he acquired it. Mitchayev benafsho. And therefore, that's how he's transgressed and is going to be punished. Lo have ad bala. No, he says that's not till he actually swallows it and it goes down his pharynx. Kegon shetechav lo letoch beit habliya, as in the case where he forced it down his throat. Hechidami, how is that possible? Idematze lahadura. Nahada, if it comes that he wants to give
Try
it
to
back,
take it back.
right? Right? Nahadar, okay? Basically, couldn't he regurgitate it out? Ilo matze lahadure, amai chayav. And if it's not possible for him to return it, in other words, spit it out or
Right.
whatever, okay, since he didn't really take it on his own, right? He was forced, amai chayav. Why do we consider him, all right, chayav, transgressing? Lo tzricha the matze lahadure al yedei hadocha. No, we find, okay, that we don't need it because it's a situation where if he chooses to try to return it, he can only do so out of, let's say, extreme measures. Okay? What happens? Rav Papa Amar, Kigon shetechav lo chavero mashkin shel truma letoch pi. Okay, Rav Papa says it's a situation where perhaps he actually poured in some liquid of truma into the throat of the person, into his mouth. Rav Ashi Amar, says Rav Ashi, Bazar she'achal truma mishalo. Rav Ashi says, no, we're talking about a situation where a non-Kohen has eaten truma on his own, right? But what happens as we go on to Lamed Aleph? And at the same time, we're going to say, Vikara Shira'in Shel Chavero, that he also tore a silk garment or silk item from his neighbor. And the Rashi, just to point out real quickly, B'sha'ah shebul'ah, at the time that he was swallowing, says Rashi. The afal gav, the mita.
So that he's swallowing the truma and he's causing monetary damage.
At the same time, right? All right.
The truma is higher level.
Okay, no, right. The truma is the higher level. Okay, so that's. But let's say whilst the other guy, okay, Reuven is pouring the stuff down my throat. But what I did is, in trying to stop him, I grabbed a garment.
I understand
So,
that. There was curious which one.
Right. So truma is the more severe. Didn't mean to pick on
No.
you. Okay. All right. Gufa. Let's come back and examine this situation, says the Gemara. Okay. Let me just check on how we're doing time-wise. Not bad. Okay. Okay. Gufa. Come. Amar Rav Chisda, says Rav Chisda. Modeh Rabbi Nechunya ben Akaneh. Rabbi Nechunya ben Akaneh would acknowledge Bigonev Chalavo Shel Chavero Va'achlo. He would acknowledge that situation where it was a incident where he stole the chalev of his neighbor and ate it, namely Shehu Chayav,
To pay him.
right? That he is obligated. Shekvar nitchayev b'gneva, because he's already transgressed and has to pay a punishment
For the
for
Geneva.
the stealing, right? Kodim sheyavo leisur chelev, before he even comes to the prohibition of eating the fat, right? That's the point. Lema, so let us say, therefore, says the Gemara, pliga the Rabbi Avi, that he's disagreeing then with the view of Rabbi Avin. The Amar Rabbi Avin who tells us, Hazorek chetz mitchilat arba. One, I'm going to say doesn't throw, but he shoots an arrow. Okay, mitchilat
On
arba.
Shabbos.
Okay,
in
yeah, we're
the
going to
Rosh
get to it
Hashanah.
in a second.
Okay.
All right, mitchilat arba lesof arba. Where is he shooting this arrow? In the public domain on Shabbat. Okay, the sof arba. Vikara shirain bahalichato. And as the arrow flies, okay, it cuts some sort of, again, silk garment. Okay, so again, we have two acts.
It's on Shabbos.
Um,
Because he wants to establish.
He's shooting an arrow in the public domain. Okay, all right, on Shabbos.
About the danger involved, not the Shabbos.
No.
No, you're high. That's the issue.
So I've got,
Over
again,
Isra
you got an example of two. We had an example before of two items.
Right.
Hold on, guys. Two items. One was stealing and one was eating, right? The chalev. Now we're going to get another example of two items. One is desecration of Shabbos, and the other is, again, tearing an item of silk. Item of silk, he would have to be paying something. Desecration of Shabbos is clearly the greater, right, transgression. Okay, Bob, you right? Okay, so that's why it's saying the chetz. So he shot this arrow or threw this arrow. Maybe that's why the language is zorek,
Sorry.
okay, instead of yoreh. Okay, he threw an arrow, mitchilat arba lesof arba. Okay, so he threw it on Shabbat for armas and Rishus Harabim, right? And also vikara shirayin bahalichato. And it cut silk along its pathway. Patur, he's exempt. She'akira tzorech hanachahi. Okay, why? Because we're saying that akira, I'm going to call it for the moment, the lifting or the upward movement, okay, also requires a downward movement, a resting movement. That's what we're saying. Hachanami, here too. Hagbaha tzorech achilahi. Maybe in our example of stealing and eating, okay, maybe here too we have to say it's a combined act, that he would only be chayev in a situation where here not only does he steal it to take it, but he eats it. That it's not two separate acts, it's one act. Okay? Maybe here, hachi hashta, says the Gemara. How can you compare that? Hatam, there in the case of the arrow, efshar lahanacha below akira. It's impossible for it to come down without first starting it up. Okay? That's the point. Hacha, here in our case of the stealing and eating, efshar la'achila below hagba'a. It's possible to eat it without lifting it up. Why? The ibai gachin va'achil. Because if he chose to, he could actually bend down and eat it.
You didn't have to pick it up off the plate. You could have been down.
And didn't have to break. Okay. Inami. Why Shabbos? Because you want to give an example that's parallel to our earlier case. We said our earlier case connected two items. One item there was where the punishment would be payment, and the other argument where there would be a more severe punishment, okay? The Isur of eating Chalif, right? So we always say the greater punishment is the one that takes precedence, okay? Right, exactly. So how do I make a parallel to that? I come over here and I say my parallel is an act where some person transgresses Shabbat, okay? And at the same time, an act occurs where he does something that would require a payment. Here too, I have that parallel of a greater transgression and a lesser transgression, and the greater transgression takes precedence.
Just one question. On a weekday, if I shoot an arrow up in the air in a public domain and it comes down, have I committed a transgression if it misses everyone?
Fortunately, if you've missed everyone, okay. I
There's no
shot an
transgression.
arrow in the air where it comes down, I know not where. All right, you didn't learn that?
There's no transgression.
Right.
No.
Okay, all right.
I get the medal of honor.
Inami, or also, hatam ibai lahadura, and there, if it's necessary, if he's trying to return it, to do what? Lo matze mahaderle. There too, he cannot return it.
Once he throws the arrow, he
It's
can't.
gone.
It's gone. It's
Right?
gone.
Hacha, here, matze mahaderla. Here, it's possible he might return
Puts it in his mouth
the
and
item.
spits it out.
Right. My ika bain hai lishna la hai lishna. So what's the difference between this language and this language, or this situation and this situation? Ika bainahu the ma'avir sakin birishut harabim v'kara shira'in bahalichato. The difference might be if he was passing a knife in the public domain, and doing so, he tore some silk garments along his way. Lahach lishna, for that language, da'amart efshar lahanacha below akira. For that reason, the language is such that we talk about putting down, okay, without lifting
You have to
up.
have a lifting and a have putting
Right.
down. So,
So
therefore, once he started
right.
carrying
So
it,
the example of the arrow gives us a complete transgression because it includes both aspects of lifting and putting down, whereas simply carrying something, okay, is only a single aspect and not a double. Okay, so that's the case. Hachanami efshar lahanacha below akira. But the Gemara says here too, it's impossible to put it down without some sort of lifting. You got to pick up the knife, okay, if you're going to carry it and use it, right? Lahach lishna da amar lo matze mahadarla. To that language where you say, okay, he cannot put it back, spit it back. Hacha matze mahadarla. Here we can say it's possible for him to put it back. Okay, so in other words, he could put back the
he
knife
just stops
in the
walking
same
and puts
place
the rabbit and drops it.
and puts it down. Okay, Gufa. Let's go back now to our earlier text. Amar Rabbi Avini says, Hazorek chetz mitchilat arba, lesof arba. One who threw this arrow on Shabbat, okay, more than the Daled Amos, okay, in public domain. V'kara shirayin ba'alichato, and it cut some silk garment, all right, along the way, patur. We said it was exempt. Sha'akira sorech hanacha, that the lifting up, okay, requires a putting down. Meitiv Rav Bibi bar Abaye. So this is answered by Rabbi Bibi.
He asks the
Following.
question.
All right, so he says, Hagonev kis b'Shabbat. Chayav. Okay, one who steals a bag, a purse, let's put it that way, on Shabbos is chayev. Why? Shekvar nitchayev b'geneva kodem sheyavo lidei isur skila. Why? Because he's already transgressed an act of stealing before he has come to deal with the prohibition of Shabbos, which would give him the punishment of stoning. So the Gemara says, wait a second. Hayam megarer v'yotzei. Maybe he was simply dragged. He dragged the bag of money, the purse, whatever, the saddle bag, whatever it is, okay, and went out. Megarer v'yotzei, dragged it and went out. Patur, he would be exempt. Shaharei isur Shabbat u'gneva ba'in ke'achad. Maybe we would say, however, that the prohibition of Shabbos and the stealing occurred simultaneously. Okay? Va'amai, and why would we say that? Hachanami, lema hagba'a, tzorech hotza'ah. Maybe here too we would say that the lifting also requires, to be a complete transgression, requires the moving, right? The removal. That's the case. Hacha b'mai yaskina. So what are we talking about then? Kegon shehegbiu almanat lahatsnio, that he's lifted it up for the purpose of hiding it. V'nimlach alav v'hotzio, and afterwards he changed his mind and then carried it out. V'chi hai gavna michayev, and in this case we're going to say he's transgressed, he's obligated. Va'amar Rav Simon, and didn't Rav say Amar Rabbi Ami, in the name of Rabbi Ami, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Hamafneh chafatzim mizavit lezavit, one who, I want to say Hamafneh, moves would be transitions, okay, but moves is good, but transitions, because I want to get the idea that there's a difference if I do it inside or outside, okay? So if I move or transition objects, goods, from one corner to another corner, v'nimlach alehem v'hotzian, and then afterwards changes his mind and takes them out, patur, is exempt. Shelo haita akira misha'a rishona lekach. Why? Because his lifting up of the objects originally was not for that purpose of taking them out, of carrying them out. Lo tema, don't say almanat lahatsnio. Don't say its purpose was to hide it, to put it aside someplace. Ela ema almanat lahotzio, but rather say our situation was clearly his intent was to remove it. Hacha b'mai yaskinen. Excuse me, what are we talking about then? Kasher amad, that he stood still for a moment when he took it. Amad lamai, stood still for what purpose? I lechatev or chehu. If he stood still in order to put it up and carry it on his shoulder, in other words, to rebalance it, or chehu, that's a common act, okay? So there's no transgression in that common act, okay? Ela ba'omed lafush, but rather he put it down to rest. Aval lekatef,
that would break up the
act, right? So he would, that's like putting it down because he picked it up, put it down. Rest, pick it up again, and so on, okay? So to rest, aval lekatef, mai, but if he were simply readjusting it to put it on his shoulder, mai, what's the situation? Okay, let's change this, a quick check on our time. Okay, patur, he would be exempt, right? Okay, Adatani, as it was taught, Hayam Megarer V'Yotzei, as he dragged it and went out, Megarer V'Yotzei, dragged and went out, Patur, he's exempt. So the
I'm
Gemara,
paying because of kumle
right? Okay, so the Gemara says, V'niflog, let us distinguish then, V'nitne b'dida, okay, and say, okay, in this case, in his situation, Bamed Varim Amorim, what are we talking about? Ba'omed Lafush, that he stood still to rest. Aval Katef Batur, but to simply rebalance it on his shoulder, he would be exempt. Ella, rather, Mani, according to whom is that? Ben Azai, that's the view of Ben Azai. The Amar Mahalech Ke'omed Dami, who says that walking is like standing. Aval Zorek, Mai, but if he throws it, what is it? Patur, be exempt. So the Gemara says, Niflog, again, let us distinguish it. V'nitne b'dira, b'dida. So let us then teach it in regarding him. B'meh dvarim amorim. What then are we talking about? V'mahalech, when he's going. Aval zorek patur. That would mean that if he throws it, he would be exempt. Megarer v'yotzei itztarichle. Therefore, we're saying that when he drags it and takes it out, that's what we needed to clarify and say. So the Gemara says, Salka da'atach, Amina, is it possible that I might have said as follows, Ein derech hotza'ah b'chach, that is not a real way of removing things, and therefore he would not be transgressing? Kamash malan comes to teach us that's not the case. Ubamai, and what are we dealing with? Ibirav Ravi. Okay, if we're talking about large purses here, large money bags.
So it's heavy. It's
right,
heavy,
it's
and you can't
heavy
pick it up and
stuff.
put it on your
Or
shoulder.
chehu, that's the common way. In other words, the common way is if it's large and heavy, you drag it out.
Right.
Right? I bezutre, if it's smaller bags of money, lav or chehu. That's not
drag
the
it.
common way to, right? Ella rather, b'mitzai, but we're talking about medium-sized bags of money. Okay? Uda afke lehecha, and he carries it where? Ida afke lerishus harabim, Isur Shabbat ika. If he carries it out to the public domain, then certainly we have a prohibition of Shabbos, right? Isur geneva leka, but maybe there is no thievery here, right? Because we're going to judge him on the more higher prohibition, which is Shabbos, right? If he's bringing it out to the private domain, Isur Geneva Ika, then I have a prohibition of thievery, Isur Shabbat Leka, but I don't have the prohibition of Shabbos. Okay? Lo tzricha. No, says the Gemara. What we needed here isn't that the case. The afke litzide, the rishus harabi, that he brought it along the sidewalk, so to speak, along the side of the public domain. Ukeman, according to whom? Ika Rabbi Eliezer, if it's like the view of Rabbi Eliezer the Amar, who says, Side rishus harabim kirishus harabim damu, that the sides of the public domain are like the public domain, Isur Shabbos Ika. Then I have the prohibition of Shabbos, right? Isur Geneva Leka, but I don't have the prohibition of thievery, because again, the Shabbos takes precedence, punishment. Ikarabanan, if it's like the rabbis, the Amrei Tzidei Rishus Harabim, love Kirishus Harabim Dami, that the sidewalk, the sideways of them, is not like the public domain. Isur Geneva Ika, Isur Shabbos Leka. Then I have the prohibition of thievery, but I don't have the prohibition of Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Le'olam Rabbi Eliezer. No, we're saying that it's generally like Rabbi Eliezer. V'chi amar Rabbi Eliezer. And when Rabbi Eliezer says, Sidei Rishus Harabim, Kerush Rishus Harabim Damu, that the sides of the public domain are like the public domain, Hani Mili Le'inyan Chiyuva de Shabbos. This is in regards to any transgressions of Shabbos. The Zimnin Didachke Rabim Va'ile Lahatam, because at times it's very crowded and on the public domain, and people have to go up on the sides of the street. Okay, Lahatam. Aval Inyan Mikne, but in regards to some sort of acquisition, Kane, okay, it's acquired. My Tama, what's the reasoning? Dahalo Shchiche Rabim. Why? Because generally people are not found, a lot of people aren't found on that sidewalk, on that side there. Okay, so let's try to finish up. Rav Ashi Amar, he says as follows: Shagon Shetzarif Yado Lemata Mishlosha. It's as if he joined his hand below. Okay, all right, below three tfachim, right? Vikiblu, and he received it. Kiderabba, like the view of Rabba. The Amar Rabba, who says, Yado Shaladam Chashuva lo ke'arba'a al arba'a, that a person's hand is considered the equivalent of 4 tfachim, right? Rav Acha matne hachi, and Rav Acha teaches it the following way. Ravina matne, Ravina teaches, le'olam da'afke l'rishus harabim. Okay, that always was saying that he took it out to the public domain. Ubirishus harabim nami kana, and in the public domain he is able to acquire it. Utravaihu b'diyuka, and the two of them are exact. Why? Daham matne kemiflage, that it's taught the way they are arguing. Ditznan has taught in the following Mishnah, Haya moshcho v'yotzei, that he pulled it out and it came out. Umeit v'reshut ba'alim patur, and he dies in the public domain.
The animal, he's stealing the animal.
Right? He's pulled out the animal. The animal dies in the public domain.
Reshus haba'alim.
And the property of the owner. I'm sorry. And the property of the owner. Patur. He is exempt. Hagbi'o.
Because he's still in the
right.
owner.
If he lifted up the animal.
He pulled it.
Okay. All right. O shahotzi o mirishut ba'alim, or he took it out of the property of the owner. Umate, and then the animal dies. Right. Chayav. Then he's talking about his being chayav, right? He became the owner of it. Okay. Right. Why? Ravina diek. Ravina was explicit when he said miresha, from the beginning section. Rav Acha diek misefer, and Rav Acha was explicit from the end section. Ravina diek miresha, Ravina was explicitly coming the beginning section. Haya moshcho, because he was pulling it out. V'yotzei, and it came out. Umeit bereshut haba'alim, and it died still while in the reshus of the owner. Patur, that's why he exempt. Why? Tama demeit bereshut ba'alim. The reason that the animal died in the reshus, the owner's land property area. Ha hotzio mireshut ba'alim umeit. But if he took it out from the property of the owner and it died, chayav. Okay. Rav Acha, what does he say? Diek misefa. It was explicit. He determined it from the end statement. Hagbio, he raised it or lifted it or moved it. O shahotzio, or he pulled it out. Hotza'ah dumia da hagba'ah. Why? Because he held that lifting it up, removing it, was similar to lifting it. In other words, acquiring it, right? Ma hagba'a da'ate l'reshutei, the same way that lifting it brings it into his possession, af hotza'ah, so likewise removing it, taking it out, nami da'ate l'reshutei, also brings it into his reshus, his possession. The Rav Acha, Kasha Resha. For Rav Acha, the earlier statement was problematic. The Ravina, Kasha Seifa. For Ravina, the later statement was problematic. Resha the Rav Acha lo Kasha. That the beginning statement was not a problem to Rav Acha. Why? Kama de lo ate le reshute. So long as it didn't enter his property, Reshut Ba'alim Karina Bay. It was considered the property, the area of the owner. Say for the Ravina Lokasha. And the end piece, okay, the end section was not problematic to Ravina. Why? Hotza'ah Dumia Dahagba'a, because he felt that removal outside was similar to lifting. Lo Amrinan, we don't say. And that's where we're going to stop today. Okay? So we'll pick that up there tomorrow. And then tomorrow we'll just do Lamed Bet. And Lamed Bet, if I'm correct in my chart, Lamed Bet is actually Sunday's daf. Okay? And then that gives me Friday morning to prepare Monday's daf. And we'll all be Yotze regarding Tisha B'Av. Okay?
Rabbi Green, you gotta publish the Thieves' Guide to Shabbos Observance. What a thief can do, or smash and grab on Shabbos, or purse snatching.
Oh.
How to snatch a purse on Shabbos without violence.